Okay, so the whisper doing full laps around the internet tonight is that Cardi B allegedly did not just stumble into this Maduka Okoye situation. She allegedly built a whole unit around it. A little digital war room. A cleanup crew. And the target of that crew was reportedly not a rival rapper, not a blogger, not a hater with a burner account, but the mother of that man's child. And sweetheart, the thing about a cleanup crew is that somebody always leaves a fingerprint on the bucket. Because right now the receipts allegedly walk themselves into daylight, and the story they tell is uglier than anything the blogs were brave enough to type out loud. Before I take one more breath, let me staple the word alleged to every single sentence in this video, because everything you are about to hear is an allegation, a claim, a report, a rumor with a good publicist. Nothing here is a courtroom finding. We are simply reading the room, and the room is on fire. So here is what supposedly happened. And I want you locked in for this timeline, because the timeline is the entire crime scene. Cardi B goes public. Not soft launch public. Not blurry elbow in a mirror public. Fully out in the open, sitting at dinner in Italy, Venice water glittering behind her, cameras eating, the internet doing what the internet does. Sitting across from her is Maduka Okoye, the Nigerian international goalkeeper, a man most of her American audience had never typed into a search bar before that week. And within hours, not days, hours, a woman named Jelicia Westhoff opened her Instagram story and started talking. And she did not talk like somebody chasing clout. She talked like somebody who had been holding a receipt in her fist for years and finally got tired of the wait. Her claims were brutal. She alleged that Okoye put his hands on her. She alleged he stepped out on her with women and with men. She alleged he walked away from their child. She alleged she and that baby got locked out. Now I need to be surgically clear here. Those are her allegations, published from her own account, and Okoye's camp has not validated a single line of it. But the internet did not need validation. The internet needed a villain, and the internet found four. And here is the beat that made me sit all the way up. Instead of the situation staying between the three adults who actually live inside it, a coordinated defense allegedly assembled overnight. Suddenly there were screenshots. Suddenly there were messages. Suddenly there were leaks that made this mother look unstable, obsessive, jealous, unwell. And the very first blog to post the package was not a neutral outlet. It was reportedly one of Cardi B's most devoted online lieutenants, the account that shows up like a paid firefighter every time her name catches a spark. The internet nicknamed him her Ken. And the moment he hit publish, the framing flipped. The mother stopped being a woman with claims. She became a crash out, a liability. A jealous ex screaming at a moving car. That is what we call narrative laundering, and it is the dirtiest trick in celebrity crisis management. You do not deny the accusation. You do not even address the accusation. You simply make the accuser look too crazy to be worth believing, and then you let the comment section finish the job for free. Except the internet is not the same animal it was in 2016. And within about 48 hours, people started zooming. Frame by frame. Pixel by pixel. And the claim that came back was that the evidence allegedly did not come from a phone at all. Multiple people who look at this stuff for a living argued that the clip circulating was machine-made, generated, synthetic, built. The mouth movement was reportedly off. The cadence sat in that dead, uncanny valley where the words arrive, but the human doesn't. And once that accusation landed, the whole operation stopped smelling like defense and started smelling like fabrication. Now let me ask you something. And I genuinely want your answer in the comment box for me, because I have gone back and forth on this all week. If your version of events is true, why would you ever need to manufacture proof? Truth does not need a render farm. Truth does not need a rendering queue. Truth just needs a screenshot and a little patience. Stay with me, because that is not even the part that unhinged my jaw. The part that unhinged my jaw came when Cardi B's camp allegedly leaned on the phrase real victims. That was the framing. That was the shield. Somebody in that orbit posted about how irresponsible it is to play with claims of abuse when there are real victims out here suffering. And listen, normally that sentence is holy ground. Normally that sentence deserves a standing ovation. But context is a beast, and context walked into this conversation with a machete. Because at the exact same moment that sentence was being typed, another human being was standing in front of cameras across the country describing what he alleges happened to him inside the orbit of the father of Cardi B's youngest child. That man's name is Blake Griffith. And he has spent this month telling anyone with a microphone that he was not a liar, not a leech, not a clout chaser, but a person whose account of Stefon Diggs deserves to be heard. Cardi B publicly torched him, called him names that trended for 2 days straight, told her audience she had the receipts, and he was lying. And Griffith did not shrink. He came back calmer than she was, and he said something that reframed the whole triangle. He was asked, flat out, on camera, about his sexuality. And he did not dodge, did not joke, did not perform. He said he is straight. He said he is heterosexual. He said he has never been with a man and no man has ever been with him. Then he explained why the rumor sticks to him anyway. And this is where the room got quiet. He said a picture is worth 1,000 words. He said he understands why people build a romance out of proximity, because when the two of them moved through stores together, he was not paying for anything. He said there were photographers standing off to the side who never got the shot. He said other men in the entourage stood against the wall and never got the shot. He described himself, in his own words, as being treated like one of the girls. Shopping, not thinking, not calculating, just being handled. And he made a point about his own nails, of all things, that I have not been able to shake. He said he writes his eldest son's name on them, MILO, $, BLAK, the same way he used to write on his nails in Sharpie as a kid in grade school. He said maybe somebody looks at that and decides he must be soft, when in reality he is simply moving the way he wants to move, because he pays his own bills. Now sit with the arithmetic of that for a second, because the arithmetic is the story. This is a man alleging that the same person who was reportedly a phantom on date night was spending real money on him in daylight. And that comparison is what has the internet in a chokehold. Cardi B was in a relationship with Stefon Diggs. Cardi B had a child with Stefon Diggs. And yet the running joke, the joke that stopped being funny somewhere around February, is that nobody can produce a single normal, boring, unglamorous date. A booth, a movie, a drive, a regular Tuesday. Instead, the archive is mostly appearances, mostly optics, mostly content. So the question the comments are screaming is not scandalous, it is sad. What exactly was Cardi B being sold? Because if the version Griffith is telling holds even partially, then what she thought was a love story might have been an arrangement she was never given the terms to. And if that is true, then all that public armor she wore for that man, all that clapping back, all that defending, all that going to war with strangers on his behalf, was reportedly spent protecting something that was never fully hers. That is not gossip. That is grief with a marketing budget. And I want to be careful here, because this is where commentary channels get sloppy. I am not telling you Stefon Diggs did anything. A man made allegations, sat for interviews, and says he has documentation. Cardi B says he is lying and that she holds the proof. Both are on the record. Neither is settled anywhere it counts. What I am pointing at is the pattern, because the pattern is where truth leaves footprints. So let us talk about that pattern, because Cardi B has walked this exact hallway before, and she walked it with the lights on. Rewind. When the Diggs situation was still fresh and glossy, half the internet was already waving red flags in her face, and they were being specific. The number of women, the number of children, the timeline overlaps. She stayed. That is her right. Nobody owes the timeline a breakup. But then came that Super Bowl weekend energy, where he reportedly moved through the biggest sports weekend of the year in the company of other mothers of his children, and Cardi B was nowhere in frame. Not backstage, not in the box, not in a single photo. And the silence around that absence was so loud you could hear it in another language. By February, the follows disappeared. The unfollow heard around the timeline. And what followed was months of that push-pull, that on-again, off-again choreography, that thing where two people keep breaking up in public and reconciling in private until neither of them can remember which version they are performing. Now watch the recycle. Because 5 months later, the same woman is at dinner in Venice with a man who reportedly arrives with his own unresolved family situation, his own accusations sitting in someone else's Instagram story, his own mother of his child holding a microphone. Different continent, different sport, same shape. And that is the part one cannot let go of, because Cardi B is not a rookie. She has 4 children now. 4. Cardi B is not a girl guessing at how the machine works. She has been inside the fire long enough to recognize smoke. So when she walks directly into a household that is still actively on fire, one of two things is happening. Either she genuinely does not care about the wreckage, or she is chasing something that has absolutely nothing to do with romance. And that is what I think this is. Not love. Proof-seeking. A woman who was publicly embarrassed, needing the timeline to see her chosen, urgently, visibly, in a beautiful city, with a man other women want. Because nothing scrubs a humiliation faster than a fresh photograph. Which brings me back to the sabotage, and why the sabotage is the tell. Here is what a secure woman does when her new companion's ex starts talking. Nothing. She lets that man handle his own house, and lets the noise starve. Silence is the most expensive weapon in celebrity, and it costs nothing. Here is what allegedly happened instead. The blogs got activated. The loyalists got their orders. The screenshots appeared. And a woman who had done nothing but describe her own life was recast as a lunatic within a single news cycle. That is not confidence. That is somebody who cannot afford for you to hear the other side. Because if the other side is credible, then the whole Venice fantasy collapses into a very ordinary story about a very ordinary situation with a very ordinary man. And can I say the shallow thing? Somebody has to, because it is doing more work here than anybody admits. Have you actually looked at the woman at the center of this? Jelicia Westhoff is stunning in that inconvenient, unpurchasable way. Nothing about her reads like it was ordered from a catalog. And in a business where beauty is currency, that kind of natural leverage makes people insane, because the audience keeps looking at her thinking, what exactly was he upgrading from? So drop it in the comments for me, because I need to know where you land. Do you believe that clip was manufactured, or do you think the internet's forensic squad got it wrong this time? And be honest, because I read every single one of these. Now let me pivot, because while all of this circus was setting up its tents, something quietly historic happened in the actual music, and almost nobody covered it properly. BIA. Let us talk about BIA. On July 20th, Whole Lotta Money did something that should have been a headline everywhere. It reportedly posted the highest single-day streaming total of any solo female rap song on Spotify that day, right around 747,000 streams in 24 hours. And that track has now allegedly crossed 70 million streams total. Now let me explain to you why that is not a nice little stat, why that is actually a scandal in reverse. That song is from 2020. It is not new. It is not being pushed. There is no campaign behind it. There is no radio machine cracking its knuckles. There is no label army buying billboards in Times Square. BIA is famously operating on a fraction of the budget her peers get handed as a rounding error, and she still put up a number that most artists need a full rollout, a features list, and a viral dance to reach. That is not luck. Luck happens once. That is durability, a song with legs so strong it is still walking 6 years later, while newer records get carried out on stretchers. And here is where I have to bring it back around, because the irony in this one is so thick you could stand a spoon up in it. Because the loudest voice publicly dismissing BIA's catalog has reportedly been Cardi B's. The whole bit, the whole comedy routine. Name 5 BIA songs. Gun to your head. You are dead. That was the joke. That was supposed to be the kill shot. And people laughed, because when you are the bigger star, your jokes come pre-approved. But numbers do not care who is funnier. Because the same album that was supposed to bury everybody has reportedly been sitting out there for about a year now without hitting platinum. No song from it is currently trending. Nothing off that project is generating a single-day streaming figure anywhere near what BIA just did with one record from 2020 that nobody is promoting. So the honest scoreboard reads like this. The artist who was mocked as forgettable has the more durable song, and the artist doing the mocking has the bigger machine and the quieter results. And that is my whole argument about BIA, and I am going to say it plainly. Her problem was never talent, and her problem was never the audience. Her problem is structural. She is signed into a situation that has reportedly been slow-walking her for years. No urgency, no priority, no push. Meanwhile, she keeps quietly outperforming her own budget, which is the most frustrating kind of career to watch, because you are literally watching someone win a race while somebody holds the back of her shirt. So congratulations to BIA, genuinely. 70 million streams with no lifeline and no cavalry. That is not a moment. That is a receipt. Now, next order of business. And this one has the charts people arguing all week. Latto and Doja Cat. Their new record reportedly jumped 20 spots on the US iTunes all-genre chart, landing around number 159. And look, I called this one the second those visuals dropped, because the visuals were doing something. They were built for clipping. They were built for stitching. They were built to be screenshotted at exactly the right frame. But here is my real question, and this is the question that determines whether this is a win or a press release. Does it chart? Not iTunes. iTunes is a mood ring. Does it hit the Hot 100? And does it hit it inside the top 50? Because we are not about to sit here and rewrite recent history. Latto has been in a cold stretch. That is not shade. That is just the tape. A couple of releases came and went without leaving a mark. So a Doja Cat feature is not a favor. It is a defibrillator, and we are about to find out whether the patient is responding. So give me a real prediction, not a hedge. Top 50 debut for Latto and Doja Cat. Or no? Put a number on it, and let us come back next week. Alright, back to the main event, because there is one more layer to this Cardi B situation, and this layer is the one that actually offends me. The phrase real victims. I need you to understand why that phrase, deployed by that camp, in that week, landed like a slap. Because for years now, every time a certain history gets brought up, the era Cardi B herself described publicly, in her own voice, about a period when she says she did what she felt she had to do to survive, including admitting on camera to putting things in men's drinks and taking what she took. The defense is always identical. She had to. She was surviving. She had no choice. And I want to be extremely fair here, because I have lived a version of hard. I have been without a place to stay. And I want to tell you exactly what that does and does not do to a person, because the excuse makers keep getting it wrong. Being broke does not hand you a syringe. Being desperate does not put something in somebody's cup. When I was at my lowest, I was not calculating how to drug a stranger. And even on my worst night, I never walked out of somebody's home holding something that did not belong to me. Poverty is not a personality. Millions of people survive it without ever taking a victim. So when a camp that has never once fully answered for that history turns around and appoints itself the guardian of real victims, my whole body itches. Because you cannot audit somebody else's pain while your own file is still open. That is the thing about hypocrisy at this altitude. It always shows up dressed as concern. Now let me tell you what I think is running this engine, and tell me if I am reaching. 2 motors. Motor 1 is a guilty conscience, because a person who has done something rarely believes anyone else's story. Motor 2 is habit. When your entire public identity was built on scorched earth, de-escalation feels like losing. And you can see both motors churning in how selective the outrage is. There is a whole performance about being harassed and attacked and hunted. There is a whole speech about the pylons. And then the second the splashback lands on her own face, the phones come out, the loyalists get deployed, the screenshots start flying, and the machine spins up like it never took a day off. That is not a victim. That is an operator. Now, please do me a favor and share this one, because I promise you the big outlets will not touch this angle. They will cover the dinner. They will cover the dress. They will run the flattering photo carousel from Venice with a headline about a new romance. Not one of them will run a headline about a mother of one being reportedly buried under manufactured evidence, because there is no advertising money in that story. There is only truth in it, and truth does not sell handbags. And while we are counting hypocrisies, let us count this one. Over the past 5 months, Cardi B has come online and gone after multiple people. Wished harm. Threatened. Said things about sending people to handle other people. And mainstream media barely lifted an eyebrow. But let one of her rivals so much as breathe wrong in a caption, and it is a full news cycle with a cheering. The imbalance is not accidental. Access is a currency, and outlets protect the people who grant it. So if you feel like sticking around for the rest of this, tap the like button and hit follow, because this story is going to have 3 more chapters before the month is out, and I intend to be on every one of them. Okay, now the deadbeat conversation, because somebody has to have it, and the timeline keeps flinching away from it. Whatever you believe about Jelicia Westhoff's allegations, one part of her story is not really in dispute in the court of public opinion. She wants that child's father present. Not money. Not a headline. Presence. And somehow that has been twisted into desperation, into bitterness, into obsession. Even in a scenario where 2 people have been separated for years, a mother wanting the father of her son to actually be in that son's life is not pathology. It is the bare minimum of the arrangement. And I understand why that might feel foreign in certain circles. Ever since Cardi B's own marriage came apart, The pattern in her orbit has been men who are structurally unavailable. In season, in another city, in another situation. The fathers are perpetually somewhere else, and when absence becomes the default setting, you stop recognizing it as absence. It just becomes the weather. But normalizing an absent father is how you raise a generation of adults still waiting on a phone call. I am not going to soften that. A man being missing is not a lifestyle. It is a wound with a schedule. So allegedly fake screenshots aside, that is the human center of this whole mess. A kid. And nobody in this war is talking about the kid. Now let me get back to the mechanics of the alleged campaign, because I promised you the anatomy, and I keep my promises. Here is how these operations reportedly run, and once you learn the shape, you never unsee it. Step 1. The accusation lands from a civilian with no platform and no publicist. Step 2. The celebrity says nothing, because responding grants legitimacy. Step 3. A friendly account with a big following and total deniability posts evidence that recasts the accuser as unwell. Step 4. The fan base amplifies it as vindication, because volume feels like verification. Step 5. And this is the part that should scare all of us. The manufactured version becomes the permanent search result, the one that outlives every correction. That is why the synthetic media allegation matters far beyond one dinner in Venice. If a mother can allegedly be recast as unstable using a clip that was reportedly generated rather than filmed, then every ordinary person is one motivated enemy away from having their reputation rewritten by a machine. We have officially entered the era where you do not need to prove someone lied. You just need to manufacture a version of them that is easier to hate. And that is the meta story hiding underneath the celebrity noise, which is why I will not let this one go. Now let me steer this back to Cardi B, because there is a question I have been circling for 3 weeks, and I want to ask it as plainly as I know how. Why the toxic ones? Every single time. Why the man with the pending situation, the open case, the crowded family tree, the unresolved ex? Because it cannot be scarcity. There is no shortage of successful, single, non-chaotic men on this earth who would clear their calendar for a phone call from Cardi B. The supply is not the issue. The selection is. And I have a theory, and you're going to tell me if it is too much. I think chaos feels like chemistry to people who have never been loved quietly. When your nervous system was calibrated by conflict, peace registers as boredom. A man with no drama feels like a man with no passion. So you keep picking the fire, because the fire is the only thing that has ever felt like being wanted. And here is the trap in this specific pick, and it is a bear trap. Because from everything reported, Maduka Okoye and Jelicia Westhoff have history going back to around 2020. That is not a fling. That is not a one-summer situation. That is years, and a child, and a whole shared architecture. Which means she is never leaving the frame. She cannot. She is the mother of his son. She will be at the graduations. She will be in the group chat about the school. She will be a permanent installation in that man's life. And any woman who enters that structure enters as the newest arrival, not the owner. So run the projection with me. Best case, this is a beautiful summer. Worst case, say the quiet part. Imagine a pregnancy comes out of this. Now you are welded permanently to a household you allegedly tried to smear your way into. And the woman you helped discredit is your child's sibling's mother. Forever. Yikes does not begin to cover it. And this is where I have to say the thing that is going to upset people. He is not going to marry her. I do not believe it for 1 second. Everything in the visible behavior reads as a season, not a life. And knowing the history in that orbit, I do not think that is even the goal. I think this is a public engagement, in the marketing sense of the word. A story. A refresh. A way to change the subject from a February that went badly. Which is exactly why the fake evidence angle stings so much. Because it reveals what the whole thing actually is. If you were secure in what you had, you would not be running interference. Nobody defends a fortress they believe is solid. You only reinforce a wall you know is thin. So let me put the third question to you. And this is the one I actually want to read. Is this a relationship, or is this a rebound with a passport? Tell me which one, and tell me why. Now, back to the receipts era, because there is one more piece of the Blake Griffith interview I have not unpacked, and it is arguably the most damaging piece of the whole thing. When he was pressed on how people read him, he did not get defensive. He did the opposite of defensive. He said that if he had come out and announced something about himself, he understands nobody would have been shocked. He said it plainly, without flinching, without insult, and without shame. And that composure is precisely why people believe him. Because liars perform outrage. Calm is expensive, and Blake Griffith had a lot of it. Meanwhile, the response from Cardi B's side was volume. Insults. Nicknames engineered for retweets. A roast built for the crowd instead of the argument. You can win a crowd that way, but you cannot win a room, because a crowd wants entertainment and a room wants evidence. And that contrast, his calm against her caps lock, is why the tide moved. Not because the internet loves an accuser. It moved because one person answered questions and the other changed the subject. So let us put the full picture on the table, all of it at once, because when you stack it, the shape is unmistakable. You have a woman 5 months out of a very public unraveling. You have a new man photographed in Venice within weeks of that unraveling becoming permanent. You have that man's child's mother going public with severe allegations within hours of the photos. You have an allegedly coordinated smear operation launched not by him, but reportedly by her allies. You have that operation's centerpiece allegedly being synthetic media. You have a separate accuser, on the record, describing the previous chapter of her life in a way that reframes the entire relationship she defended for a year. And you have the phrase real victims being wielded by the one camp that has never fully closed its own file. Every single thread in that braid leads back to the same nerve. Insecurity, not villainy. Insecurity, the kind that makes a person need to be seen chosen publicly and immediately, and need everyone who complicates the picture removed from the frame. And here is the part that should make everybody uncomfortable, because it is the part that makes this repeatable. It works. Right now. If you polled the timeline, a meaningful chunk of people would tell you Jelicia Westhoff is unstable and could not name a single source. They would just have the feeling. And that feeling was installed. Deliberately. In a weekend. That is the whole business model of modern reputation warfare. You do not have to convince anyone. You just have to leave a residue. So let me tie the bow, and then I have one more thing for you that I genuinely think is the most important part of this entire video. We open tonight with the claim that Cardi B allegedly assembled a whole unit to bury the mother of Maduka Okoye's child. And at the top of this video, if you are honest, part of you thought that sounded like an exaggeration. A stretch. A blogger being dramatic for a thumbnail. Now look at what we walked through. The timing that lines up too perfectly to be accidental. The loyalist account that publishes on cue. The evidence that reportedly does not survive a forensic look. The rhetoric about real victims arriving in the same week a man is publicly describing himself as one. The pattern repeating from Diggs to Venice with almost mathematical precision. That is not a stretch anymore. That is a shape. And the one loop I am deliberately leaving open, because I genuinely do not have the answer and I am not going to pretend I do, is the question of who actually made that clip. Because there are two versions of this story and they are very different. Version 1. Cardi B knew, approved, and directed it, which would make this a campaign. Version 2. An overzealous supporter did it unprompted, and she simply chose not to condemn it, which would make it a failure of character rather than an act of malice. And I want to be scrupulously fair. Nobody has proven version 1. Nobody. What we have is proximity, timing, and silence. Make of that what you will, but make of it honestly. What I do know is this. Cardi B has not asked anybody to take it down. And silence, at this level, is a decision. So tell me where you land. Was this a coordinated operation or an unhinged fan doing homework nobody assigned? Is BIA the most undersupported artist of her generation? Or is the label actually right about her ceiling? And do Latto and Doja Cat crack the top 50? Or are we going to be having a very different conversation next Tuesday? Drop all 3 answers in the comment box. I read them. I reply to the spicy ones. And I have been known to read the best ones out loud. And listen, before you go anywhere, there is a thread inside this story that is even bigger than the drama, and I want to leave you sitting in it, because it is going to matter to you personally within about 2 years. Everything we just discussed rests on one fragile assumption, that you can still tell the difference between a real recording and a manufactured one. For your entire life, that assumption has been safe. If you saw a video of a person saying something, that person said it. If you saw a screenshot of a message, that message existed. That was the floor under all of our arguments. That floor is gone. And the reason this Jelicia Westhoff situation matters more than any Venice dinner is that it is a live demonstration of what happens after the floor disappears. A civilian gets accused of fabricating her own life story using material that that was itself allegedly fabricated. Think about how perfectly circular that is. The lie's whole defense is calling the truth a lie. Now scale that down to your life. An ex-partner with a grudge and a laptop. A coworker who wants your position. 30 minutes and a subscription is all it takes to build a version of you saying something you never said, in a voice nobody can tell from yours. And then you discover what she discovered. The correction never travels as far as the accusation. That is the actual story of this month. Not a romance. Not a chart position. A working demonstration that a person's reputation can now be rewritten by anyone with a grudge and a Wi-Fi connection, and that our instinct is still to believe our eyes. So the next time a screenshot lands in your feed, and it perfectly confirms what you already wanted to believe about somebody you already dislike, pause. Just for a second. Ask who benefits from you believing it. Ask who published it first. Ask why it arrived exactly when it was most useful. Because that pause is the only defense any of us have left. And let us close the loop on the music, because there is a lesson buried in those numbers. BIA had no campaign and posted a record-setting day with a song from 2020. Cardi B had the machine, the budget, the promo, the placements, the press, the features, and the album has reportedly been sitting there for a year without a platinum plaque and without a single trending record. Latto needed a Doja Cat feature to get back into the conversation at all. And what does that tell you? It tells you the machine cannot manufacture durability. It can manufacture a debut. It can manufacture a week. It cannot manufacture a song people still voluntarily play 6 years later when nobody is being paid to remind them it exists. Which is exactly the same lesson as the smear campaign, just in a different key. Manufactured things have a shelf life. Real things do not. You can build a narrative. You can build a clip. You can build a rollout. But you cannot build the thing that makes people stay. So here is where I leave it, and then I am going to point you somewhere. Cardi B is standing at a fork, and I do not think Cardi B sees it. One road is quiet. On that road, she says nothing about Maduka Okoye's household. Lets that man clean his own house, stops arguing with accusers in public, stops deploying loyalists, and lets her work do the talking. That road is boring, and it is the only road that ends well. The other road is the one she has been on since February. On that road, every accusation gets a counterattack, every critic becomes a target, every new man becomes a press release, and every mother of a child in the vicinity becomes an obstacle to be managed. That road has a lot of engagement on it. It also has a cliff at the end of it, and the cliff does not negotiate. And when we look back at this month a year from now, I suspect we will not be talking about a dinner in Venice at all. I think we will be talking about the week the internet learned that fabricated evidence had officially entered celebrity feuds, and that the first person it was reportedly used against was not a rival with a legal team, not a mogul with a publicist, but a mother with an Instagram story and nothing but her own account of her own life. That is the part one want you sitting with tonight. And that is exactly why I am not letting this go. Because there are two things about to break wide open. First, if that clip really was generated, somebody made it, and somebody paid for it, and that trail exists on a server somewhere. Files remember. People forget, but files remember. Second, Blake Griffith says he is not finished, and history says that when a person keeps talking calmly for this long, they are usually holding something back for the moment it hurts most. So do this for me. Hit like so this reaches the people getting the sanitized version. Follow so you are in the room when the next chapter drops. And share it with the one friend who defends everybody until receipts arrive. And then go watch the video I did on how these celebrity crisis machines actually get built, who gets paid, which accounts get activated, and how a story gets rewritten in 72 hours. Because once you see the blueprint in that one, you will understand this entire situation on a completely different level, and you will never look at a leaked screenshot the same way again. I am going to be here, reading every comment, chasing every thread, and dragging every receipt into the light the second it surfaces. Until then, protect your name, question your feed, and stay dangerous. Everything in this video is alleged, reported, or claimed. Nothing has been proven in any court, and every person named here is entitled to the presumption of innocence and the right of reply, which I will publish in full the moment it arrives.